Greetings, thinkers, thunkers, and all those in between. Welcome back to the Four Mortal Coils podcast. It's going to be looking and maybe sounding a little bit different this time around because we are using a new platform called Riverside. So shout out to Trevor for finding that and hooking us up into this new domain. Today's topic is multifaceted, but is going to deal with a few different things. One of those being, does religion correlate to good behavior? And I have a couple more down here. Are religious people, quote, better people in a sense of like a moral standard, perhaps? Does religion make society better, so to speak? I think is going to be an inevitable product of whether or not religion makes better people or creates a better person, so to speak. Anyways, that's what we're here to talk about today on our first ever video podcast. So yeah. So everybody else, I don't know if you want to go around the virtual room.
Yeah, for sure. We need to make introductions.
Yes, we do.
Sorry,
this is the
followers,
first time.
this is what I look like.
Unfortunate.
Call us up, Rick. Go around your screen.
So yeah, to my right of my screen, we have Tanner.
How you doing? Should I give a spiel, or should we go into the topic?
Give a spiel.
Well...
Tell us why you look that way,
well, a combination of genetics and a shovel. I got set on fire as a kid and put out with chains.
Man went into the forbidden room. It didn't end up very good.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I have a big question that we might need to clip out. So Tanner has been frozen now for a good 30, 40 seconds. But like it said earlier, that,
yes,
that recording will be a better quality than what I see. So is that
true.
good?
I should
Cool.
I should have brought that up earlier. We're totally solid. The way it works is, in post, we're all being separately downloaded in our own private services, and we'll all be synced together in post.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to look gorgeous.
Yeah, I
Tanner's
imagine
still
if
doing this right now.
Yeah.
Like on my screen, like he's just stuck doing this.
It is really perfect.
Hold on.
I
I wonder if I
why,
can take a picture.
fellas,
Come on.
Goddamn.
I imagine
click back in.
If
There
there's
we
any
go.
sort of...
I'll show you all that later.
Fellas, is it okay to be kawaii?
I don't know what fucking tomfoolery Tanner is up to behind that frozen happy face.
That is great.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
This is like one of those pictures that they post whenever somebody's either been arrested for murder or they've been killed in some tragic accident.
He'll feature on a YouTube video 10 years from now about and
Right.
later that night he killed 30 women.
There's like a red circle with an arrow pointing to like one of the elements on the periodic table behind him.
Yeah,
Or something.
it's arsenic and they're pointing to it, trying to convince you some kind of conspiracy. Every fucking person knows about arsenic.
Oh my god.
Oh.
Okay.
We're not going to edit any of that out. This is hilarious.
So that's Tanner. Just beneath me, we have Trevor.
I think it's a little mean to say he's beneath you. Huh?
But I mean, he's so far down. I mean, he cannot be stomped by the foot of man. We know that.
There are none above me. Only Tanner remains on my level.
Only Tanner, and he's just an ethereal image as far as we're concerned.
Scum of the earth. I'm telling you.
I am the demiurge. Right?
Yes, he is. This is the first time we're coming to you live in three dimensions at this point. It's looking pretty good. I hope we were as attractive as you had hoped and dreamed. If not, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
We're not people. We're not.
Yeah. Should we talk about the topic? Or
give us a spiel about the topic or something.
Maybe a little taste,
I see. Just be a little tasty about it.
Yeah.
So the topic being, does religion correlate with good behavior? Well, the issue is with this is you literally have to define every single part of that sentence, and each part of it is a day long of a conversation that I'm not sure you can quite get to a satisfactory answer for. what does it mean to be a good person? Is it service to the state? Is it service to oneself? Does it depend on whoever's asking? All these sorts of things. That's kind of an issue that you need to sort of address before you can actually address this question. And then another thing, does religion, what do we mean by religion? These sort of large, structured ways of thought that sort of scaffold people together, if you want to look at it like that, or is that also itself just a bad way of looking at what religion is? What's a satisfactory way of defining what religion even is? We have to do all these things, you know? And if we don't, well, we don't really talk about anything.
That's fair. Well, in that case, last but certainly not least, we have in the bottom right corner, weighing in at 200 and no, we have Steven.
Yeah. So, brothers and sisters, welcome. First time seeing us in this kind of light. I hope the lighting is not bad. I certainly don't have the same setup as some other people, but be patient with me. Maybe next week we will do better. Tonight's topic, very it's not that it's out there. It's in your homes. It's everywhere. Religion is everywhere. And
It's
the
behind
question
you
is,
right now.
it's behind me right now. I mean, and the question is, do we somehow benefit from a lie? No, not really. And that's what we're here to talk about. Like, at least that's why I'm here to talk about. Like, why specifically we're not better as people, better as families, better as municipalities, better as countries, or better as a planet for religion. It's a disgusting practice, and it needs to go the way of the dinosaur. That's all. But I just don't have very much patience for it anymore. Really, people, what I'd like to communicate here is that I'm probably going to talk a lot about my own personal story, quite a bit here. I should probably say trigger warnings from the get-go. I don't know what else to talk about. Let's put it that way. And so, no apologies, but forgive me in advance if some of the things I say bother you.
The man is
Perfectly said.
unapologetic.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was trying to contain my laughter there, but I was my Streamlabs I noticed stopped recording, and I don't know if that's something. I'm about to start it again here, see what happens. I don't know why it
you're
went
still
off, but
going strong for me.
when I did that, it I had to open my file explorer, and I know it looked like I got flashbang.
Tanner, by the way, during that whole speech of mine is still going. I mean,
Yes.
like he's still doing it.
I don't know why
I'm holding this position. It's actually not frozen.
He's actually just holding the position.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let me have a little review here. So there's one way that I thought about going about this whenever we eventually get to, I guess, the societal part. We can start wherever. It doesn't really matter to me. Because at first the two ways I look at it is, does religion correlate to good behavior on like an individual scale? Like, can somebody be a good person and be religious? Are people more likely to be good people? However we want to define that, which, like Trevor said, we may want to try to narrow that down a little bit before we dive too deep. Or, is, like I said, is somebody more likely to be a good person if they are religious? That's the individual scale. And then eventually getting to, does religion benefit society in a more measurable or a better way than, say, a secular society? And there's a lot of data that we can look at for something like that on multiple different points. And I have a bunch of those written down. Yeah.
I'm happy, Brayton, that you might have come more prepared than me on this one. I'm usually so much on top of the data, but not this time. Like I say, I think I'm going to stick to the personal story.
Sure. I think you'll realize as we get deeper in the conversation that a lot of this might click in your head, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and you can just run off the things.
I would suggest that because it's data, it should click with everyone's head. In other words, data is data.
Mm-hmm.
Right. 92% of statistics are made up on the spot. No, but let's start like with Trevor, with what Trevor said, and try to talk about what do we mean by good behavior or good people.
That like, what do we mean by good behavior? What do we mean by what creates a good person, or what defines somebody as good as towards as against someone who is bad? But also whether or not when I say this is good behavior, am I saying that Trevor thinks this is good behavior, or that this is good behavior? A tree could fall in the woods, and also this is good behavior. No one has to see it, and it's good behavior. Is it a knowledge question, or is it like a I said this wrong earlier, and my friend Farhad laughed at me. It's like ontologically good behavior, like something that's structured into reality.
You said you said ontologically wrong, or you meant to say ontologically?
I don't remember. I just remember him saying
it was a combination of teleological and ontological.
Yeah,
ontological.
Okay, there we go. All right. Well, thank you. We need to. It's a very important thing to explore here, because we need to say exactly what we mean in this stance. Because if you suddenly realize that the ground gives out from under you, and this comes back to that really annoying conversation we had earlier. It was really fun, but nevertheless, it was something it's difficult to get to the center of. And during the third episode, when we talked about morality, if the ground gives out from underneath you, when you look for the moral base, when we talk about, okay, well, what is this good behavior thing? If the ground gives out from underneath you, then this is just a bad question. It's not a question that leads towards good answers. It's sort of like asking how many angels are on the head of a pin. It doesn't serve any sort of purpose in that way, or at the very least, it's a very little value, at least to our paradigm, to the way that you and I look at reality.
Right.
I disagree. In what way do I disagree? Just for short, does religion make people better? No. In other words, if we can get as stuck in the weeds as maybe the question is framed in bad faith, we can also get stuck in the weeds of, well, I said so.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, go ahead, Tanner.
Oh, I was gonna when it comes to the question of does religion make people better per se, or make their actions more moral, reflect upon taking Christianity as an example of why someone would be doing those good acts. Look at the core drive behind their reasoning for their actions. It is not so much that it's something they believe is genuinely a good act, but rather just something that the doctrine told them to do. Well, I'm not saying that devalues a good action. It certainly makes it less true, in my opinion, as a morally good act. If that makes any sense.
Sure. I think, and you guys know where I'm going to go with this, is that I think that we can definitely... Oh, hang on. Oh. Sorry. Anyways, I think you guys would know where I would want to go with this, and that's pointing out, that there's definitely some sort of humanistic ideal that is shared between all people,
yeah,
regardless of whether they realize it or not. we could even try, if we wanted to kind of get stuck in the weeds, like Stephen was saying, and adhere to sort of existing laws in the United States as an example of, well, what it means to be good, perhaps. Like an easy go-to example would be to murder someone would be a grave evil, or would not be a good thing at all. There's a reason that it's against the law to steal, to do numerous other things we can easily point to in our society and say that these are against the law. These are not good. This would not be a good person. So we could try that angle, or we can even just skip to sort of societal issues. It's a very easy way to talk about a lot of.
It's not a quantum leap, right?
Right. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. What we're talking about is ethics, and the politics is just the ethics on a larger scale.
Sure.
When I say going to the societal part of the discussion, and almost every political issue that we face in today's time can be looked at through a religious lens, and they almost exclusively fall entirely on one side of the aisle. I was watching a sociology professor earlier who teaches, I can't quite remember the university in California, and I think he also guest lectures in somewhere in Europe. But he was going through these list of political issues and talking about, well, here's where the data shows that different religious groups, outstandingly, particularly Western religions, stand entirely on one side of the aisle with most political issues today. And just to give you an example of those, that would be things like racism, sex and gender issues, LGBTQ issues, climate issues, the argument over bodily autonomy, guns, et cetera, ad nauseum. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. It wasn't necessarily surprising, but it was neat to see data that supported that, although I think that was from 2007. Not that would have changed very much, because the content that we all consume from 2007 is just as relevant then, if not more today. For example, this book was published in 2007, and I just finished.
I think.
Oh.
I don't know. I thought it was 06.
So.
May 2007 first edition.
No, maybe it was the God Delusion that was 06.
Is it signed
Perhaps.
well?
They were all about the same time. So, and then at the same time, I have just finished reading this book. Actually, I don't have the book on me, but I do have the cover. The Assault on Reason by Al Gore is talking about a lot of the political issues. That same political issues, same time period, all just as I said. Just
in other words, reasonably dated. Like in other words, the claims have a date, that we can look at.
Right. I mean, these are all over 10 years old, but like I said, still very relevant. So what angle do you guys want to go?
Well, I want to say there are a couple things there that I think are to me at least in need of addressing. The first thing is, we could talk about like the things that like what you could call conservatism, or that general idea of wanting to keep things the same, can lead towards things that you consider to be immoral behavior, leads towards things that we would consider difficult, like what you've just espoused now, like not moving towards like progressive, like LGBT rights or that sort of thing, or racism, for example. Those are great examples of something that the right, or just not even the right, let's just talk about conservatism, the want in a society to keep things the way that they are presently, can be really bad. It can be a really bad thing. And I think that's one way to characterize it. However, if we're talking about like whether or not religion or the thing that is can, and at least in our present sense, because that's the way we're looking at it, the way that things are that we don't like, that has been for a long time, conservatism in that way can lead towards bad things. But at the same time, you can say the same thing for what you could call like liberal ideology or liberal policies or ideas. or just really, when I say liberal, I just mean anything that institutes or wants a mass change across all of society.
Progressivism.
Yeah. In other
These
words,
could also be incredibly bad.
you're talking about the American, liberal and so on.
Sure,
Good
yeah.
old liberalism.
Yeah, what I mean by liberal is just the act of a change. Like, there's always going to be, for example, in like ancient Rome, Julius Caesar during that time and in that place in Rome was in charge of the liberal party in the Roman Republic before he seized everything, and Pompey was in control for a time of the conservative party. And you can see these things. It really, what I mean by this is the keep things the same party and change things party.
Exactly.
And if you want to look at
Exactly.
things in terms of, so we're currently in a state in the 21st century now where we sort of see all of things leading up to this point as being defined and featured or characterized by what you could call religion, whether it be Catholicism or just any religion you want to think of, like these groupings that we have that sort of bring all of us together in that sort of way. It's the way that it was, that you could say in that way it's conservative, and then we want change. We want these changes. We want people to be progressive in terms of LGBT rights. We want people to be progressive in terms of racism, or if you're according to some veganism and that sort of thing. We want these kinds of changes. But you have to be aware that these things aren't necessarily collinear all the time. Religion can be sort of a new thing as well. I mean, after all, there was a time when Christianity was a relatively new thing. What I mean to say is detach ourselves from the want to keep things the same as being necessarily the same thing as religion, and also to say that the wanting to change things, while can be good, can also be extremely bad. Looking at, for example, Russia in the earlier 20th century, or hell, I mean, Nazi Germany. I mean, everyone hates this because, like, you bring up Hitler immediately. That's like, fuck you, man. Like, what are we even doing here? Like,
Look,
why does it always come back to Hitler?
And then
no
it is
one's
my
been
turn,
evil
Trevor.
enough in the
Please.
last 150 years, all right, to give us a good logical extreme in anything else. He's all we've got.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I think we were all just having to think there. I don't think it's any. I mean, anything at a given time that turned out being bad was at one time a new thing. Nazi Germany, if that's going to be the example is we're in post World War I Germany. Everything's gone to shit, and this guy's like, well, you know what? This is a great opportunity for me to introduce a new way of doing things that's going to restore Germany to its former glory. And people were like, hell yeah. And unfortunately, that turned out the way that it did. And here we are. And we look back and say that was the most.
Okay, we know not to do that again.
Well, right.
you know.
Well, you would hope so.
You would hope.
But
I'm gonna.
If the Uyghurs are not being exterminated, what are you talking about?
That's another conversation.
Genocide is bad. Okay.
Okay.
Also for the social media, I'm gonna cut it right before you say unfortunately, right there when you're talking about Nazi Germany, and I'm gonna use that as one of our like uploads. Just Brayton talking about. He's like, oh, I'm gonna try this new thing. We'll see how this goes. It's gonna be great.
All right, where do we need to jump from here?
Well, so I don't know.
The funny thing is, I think we all believe relatively the same thing.
Well,
right. I'm just trying to bring us along the right path, so we're not just like, nope.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, literally pack it in a bag and leave it. I mean,
well, for me, please.
I think religion, or at least religions in the organized sense, definitely do have the more potential than a lot of things to make people and societies better, just because they offer that framework for all of these things to be put together in this big like social contract. Like, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you'll go to, bad place. And if you do good X, Y, and Z, you'll go to good place. It's just it. While I think it gives one degree of separation more off of what would I think would be good humanist values of do good for the sake of doing good, rather than for get get reward, avoid risk. It certainly does, at the very least, offer a framework for a lot of civilizations and societies to actually stand on their own. No?
Well, but Tanner, just because something is mimetic, just because something has a self-replicating function, doesn't mean it's a good thing. And I know you know that.
Sure.
I remember believing exactly as you say, exactly as you just said, that maybe it's good for these things or maybe it's good for those things. No, it's not.
Oh, it's certainly outlived its purpose now. It's
Well,
Well,
what I'm trying to say is that it was never a good idea. I mean, these ideas are fabricated. The
well,
laws of nature cannot be suspended. They are
yeah, indeed.
fabrications.
certainly,
In other
certainly.
words, if you have to lie
Well, here,
to a whole lot of people to get things going, then it's probably not a good thing. It's probably not a good thing that you're starting there.
so this comes back to one issue. I hear what you're saying, but one issue that I have with this is what we mean by good. We have to like define exactly what we mean by good for something, or rather, for
Yeah.
example, if you want to talk about like there's something to be good for something, here's an example of something being good for civilization, let's say, which may in itself be a good. Uh, let's talk for a second about the Abbasid Caliphate. If anyone's not familiar, it was I believe it was the second dynasty. There could have been like no, it was the third dynasty or the third caliphate in Islam that essentially moved the capital from Damascus over to Baghdad and created what we now call the Islamic Golden Age. It was a beautiful time period, and if it wasn't for this thing that the four of us all none of us believe that Muhammad flew to Jerusalem on a flying horse. None of us believe this. But there is something to be said, and this is going to sound very strange because it is, that uh, this wrong idea, this mimetic thing, created a sweep across the creation of an entire civilization from all the way from Al Andalus all the way over to modern day India, spread way across all of this to create this huge organized structure from which you can have philosophy take place.
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
stars
How
that
much?
have
How much by force? That's my question. How much by force?
how much by force?
Yeah, how much by force? In other words,
A
if
lot of
you
it.
if
A
you
lot
if
of
you
it.
inform a lot of people, hey, we're going to actually kill you, like unless you obey the final and unalterable word of God.
You will
Mhm.
literally be murdered.
Don't waste my time, is what I say to that. In other words, I mean, how many people do you have to put over the barrel in order to create this supposed golden age? I mean,
Well,
um,
a lot. But
yeah,
that's what's
Right.
horrifying about this line of reasoning, about this series of questions. That's what's horrifying about this. You really touch it. You really touched it just then, right on the focal point of how dangerous this is. Because there's a lot to be said about us losing access to Aristotelian and Greek philosophy if it wasn't for the existence of the Abbasid Caliphate and the Islamic Golden Age. By translating the Attic Greek of Aristotle, especially Aristotle and other Greek philosophers, the entire literature that Europe at this point had no access to, completely lost it during the Dark Ages, or just during that entire swamp of just Christianity doing its thing. You can characterize it as swamp. You can characterize it as a lot of things. But
a
anyway,
stagnation of some kind for sure.
stagnation of ideas, talking about like angels on a pin, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
During that exact period is when you see. I wanted to mention this earlier. Most stars in the sky do not have names, but of the ones that do have names, most of them have Arabic names. This period is monumental. I mean, think of algorithms, or it's actually the
Yeah.
Hindu numeric system, but we call it the Arabic numeral system because that's where it came from, as far as we're concerned. the concept of zero being written in numerals. These things came across by not about religion per se, but just memetics in that way. Because Stephen,
Yeah.
you
So,
really touched
so
it there too.
I have a direct counter proposal for those of us who are listening. The laws of nature are there for us to discover. In other words, who's to say that we would not have discovered them sooner in the absence of all religion? Regardless, the laws of nature are waiting there to be discovered. So why does it take religion by force to get there? It doesn't. We've made countless discoveries in the absence of religion. Our societies, the floor for poverty and starvation, all of those things have just gone completely up since the world started growing out of religion. And we need to stop making excuses about it. We need to stop trying to give religion credit because I'm growing closer and closer to the point of saying it deserves no credit ever. Just literally ever. Once again, I believe it's Sam Harris who said, if all the adults on this planet died, and if all religious texts were burned, and everything that came out of religion was just destroyed, and the human race propagated thereafter, those gods that we once worshipped would be completely forgotten, but the laws of nature would be rediscovered, named after other people.
Right.
The stars in the sky named after Islamic mythos is of no concern. They would be renamed by another system of people. I mean, in other words, just because they have Arabic names does not mean anything. What does matter is, the technology that they got that they got together to look at these stars, or all the mapping that they did with stars, making a calendar and so on. Those things are impressive human feats done by no deity. That's all.
And perhaps they would have discovered and provided a lot more technology had they not eventually, decreed mathematics essentially the work of the devil, or however those went about to the end of the Islamic golden age.
That would be the Muslim, not the Muslims, but the Mongols coming in and destroying Baghdad, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole other thing. That's
Well,
Baghdad being
Yeah.
maltreated.
And that movement was also deeply religious. Just as well. Let's just be clear. Very, very religious people,
And so there's a direction I want to go with this. And the reason I want to go there is mainly a lot because of what I read in this book, Assault on Reason. This book is primarily a criticism of the Bush administration, which makes sense being published in 2007 by Al Gore. But at the onset of the book, it's almost completely a look at how reason plays such an important role in our democracy in the United States, and how critical that was
to the human enterprise.
Sure. Absolutely. But it contains so many great quotes from numerous founding figures about how important sort of these essential functions to our democracy are. And so I think when we talk about the good things that religion provides, or even more particularly, like you two were talking on these forces that swept through nations and inspired change and created developments. Well, what vehicle were they moving through time with? They were moving with religion, not by reason, at least not in the majority, so to speak. Most of these developments were being done in the name of some god or some higher purpose. We
deity.
look at, why don't we make cathedrals the way that we used to, or why don't we I follow all these little accounts on social media that post beautiful buildings from around the world that are almost exclusively religious, because the religious were so motivated to create them, whether by force or by necessity, out of that was just what was, or even the deep-rooted passion that one can have for such devout beliefs. But I want to look at a comparison between what I think is a core part of not just religiosity, particularly Christian, or particularly the Judeo-Christian traditions, as those are the ones I'm most familiar with, versus sort of, I think, the ideal, perhaps for the four of us, which would be a sort of secular humanism. That I think is
some version of that,
right, but I think that is at the core of America. I can't be entertained by these people who say that the United States is a Christian nation. Like, yeah, Stephen, don't waste my time.
It's
Go,
very serious.
It's a stupid notion.
Go read some literature by Thomas Jefferson, or by any
Thomas
number.
Paine.
Right, Thomas Paine. Go ahead, Trevor.
Oh, sorry, no. I have this camera. Yeah,
no, I thought he was weird. Like, everybody be quiet. I have something to say.
I didn't mean to.
No, you're good.
But I do.
But look, seriously. I was just talking about this to someone, not a student, but the revolution that we partook in, our actual revolution, the United States Revolution, was against monarchism. The people endowed by the deity to subjugate with impunity. I mean, just impunity. And so the notion that religion played a part in raising the floor of poverty, raising the floor of starvation, and so on is just completely backwards.
So one thing I'm kind of worried about. We mentioned secular humanism a lot. So we talk about, like, does religion correlate with good behavior? So when I think of religion, and I'm curious how y'all feel about this. And I'm all right, not that, but I already know how you feel about that. But I'm curious how you feel about. I always describe what you would call religion as something as the subservience of faith over reason. Like that's one good way of visualizing this relationship here. Like there's a sort of touching interaction between these two separate pillars of civilization up until this point that have existed, for good or for worse, or good or bad. These two ways of visualizing reality, one according to reason, whether it be Aristotelian philosophy that leads into Thomas Aquinas, that influences all of like Western philosophy through like the Catholic Arch, which is weirdly enough Catholic Arch, through reason. That was a really big important thing there. Or like the idea of like faith being the thing that's the main pillar, and everything should be subservient to faith. Like such as Kierkegaard, for example. While he was a very reason-based person, he seems to be very. A lot of his life came from reason. He spent most of his life running from it and towards like this pillar of faith, and how everyone should be a sort of knight of faith in that way. So that's one thing I wanted to like sort of put on the table. I think is important to sort of show there. But I really wanted to mention this other thing. The idea that really this isn't about this sort of relationship there. Well, it is, but it's more important to mention memetics, the travel of ideas as they sort of swamp over, because that's really what I was thinking about earlier. And I do think, Stephen, your point that you made after I spoke was a solid like spear directly to the throat of that argument, because it just completely knocks it out, because these things you'll find them again. I very highly sympathize with that. But I really want to think about this idea that what I was characterizing there about the Abbasid Caliphate is the same thing you could ascribe towards secular humanism or any such thing, any such ideology. It's just anything that sort of swamps people together into a unit that they may become something new or something revitalized, to sort of trans-evaluate the system and become this large thing, whether that be the United States through a secular humanism, whether that be the ancient Sumerians coming together as small city-states, forming like a small, very early empire, or whether that be the Catholics running around creating the Holy Roman Empire. Like there's this sort of mimetic thing that occurs that I think is shared across all of these things. And I think it's of value to look at it according to those means, because I think that's the same thing that happened with the Catholics and with the Muslims after that is what's happening right now with the four of us talking about what you would call like the love of liberty and secular democracy. Like I think these things are quite shared, and I think the only difference here between religion and everything else is this relationship between faith and reason. And that's like the main, if not the only difference between what we call like the mimetics of religion and the mimetics of secular humanism in that
Okay.
way.
Okay. But so, and forgive me if anyone else wants to talk, but I just feel impassioned. I don't know. Um, so let me try and characterize your argument in the best possible way. You're saying that if we take a unifying idea like religion, that its utility is in its unification, just as secular humanism has the same mimetic quality of being unifying. Is that
Mhm.
true or false?
It is true.
I decry foul play. I absolutely 100% disagree. Um, here's the deal. Sharing my personal story here in a moment. You know, for any people who need that warning, as well. Um, I would like to say on the onset that the plural of my anecdote is not evidence. In other words, it doesn't matter how many people have my same story. Dear listener, if you have my same story, feel free to contact us. Brayton's armed with the data. We'll hear from him, and his words will be more powerful than mine. But I completely disagree with the unifying aspect of religion for the following reasons. So whenever I was young and in a cult, uh, it was very much the case that my parentage came from the people who were in charge of these cults on both sides of my family. My mom's side of the family had what was I mean balls deep in a cult, and there are members of my family who still are. They just can't escape it, it seems. And my dad's side was also that deep. Both of them, both sides, inundated with pastors galore, whom I now know as charlatans. And yes, I'm speaking about my ancestors. They are charlatans. If given the opportunity, any one of them would have become one of these mega evil, large church people, like out in Texas, taking millions from people who can't possibly afford it. Given the opportunity, they would have been those kind of people. That's the kind of people I come from. And I want to make it clear that I've done almost everything I know to do to understand where they came from. In other words, they're still just humans. All right, set that out there now. But look, here's the deal. In my experience, religion of any kind, I've been to mass, I've been to literally hundreds of different churches. Regardless, it always denounces people who are not in those benches, not attending mass, not attending, whatever gathering it is, regardless of religion, as other. In other words, this is our in group. These are your people here who are sitting with you. Everyone not here today is worthy of being called the other. They are the other ones. They're the ones that we good people don't mix with. Well, okay. So religion, in my experience, denotes the other as other and dehumanizes them. Number two, and much worse, um, literally every pastor and preacher I've ever met has had these same kind of words to tell to me. As I was growing up, they were grooming me to become a pastor. They were grooming me to become one of these cult leader people. And thankfully, I've escaped all of that. But in that grooming process, cross cult wise. I mean, there was at least 4 cults involved in what I'm talking about. Across all of them, they were telling me the same message, that the peoples in those benches, the persons in those benches, are to be treated like cattle. So not only does religion call the people who aren't with us other, it calls the people who are in those benches, the people who are in the cult, as no more than cattle. I was informed on more than one occasion that they are my inheritance. Those were the words spoken to me. They are my inheritance. And those were people, as though I could inherit people. No, religion does not cause unity at all.
Well, I will say to that, first of all, I think those things that you just characterize is, and this is going to be another Hitchism. Tanner, I'm not sure what you're up to over there.
He is still.
He's still, he's
during
still.
that whole other speech I gave. Just
I just shot up like 2 ounces of black tar heroin.
man.
All right. Well, while you do that, try not to fiddle with the Coors coin.
I will say,
I dropped a bottle cap there.
Fair enough.
I do want to interject this really quickly because what Steven said is a good segue for me to introduce one of these data points. And now, while I say that, this isn't a particularly... I'm grabbing these straight from this stuff that I was looking at earlier. I was trying to find the actual study, and I'm going to try to plug that in here as I go through this as we continue talking.
There's always bias with a study. If you're referencing just
Sure.
like one study or a meta study, there's always bias. But still, everything that you're about to say, data-wise, completely dwarfs whatever my personal story is.
Sure, but where I want to take that and how you talked about from this religious perspective, the other. This is just to preface. This is what I was talking about earlier with how this is one of the issues that religious in the United States or everywhere even. I'm going to make sure I include that because this is within the purview of global religions. Now, that isn't to say that, for example, on guns, a Hindu or Buddhist would obviously be a lot more like siding with like an atheist on we should have a lot more stringent gun laws because that's a lot more in line with such a Buddhist way of thinking.
I'm afraid that's where a real issue is there. I mean, whether or not Buddhism there, but I'm an atheist, and I don't really think very highly of creating very strong gun laws. Those two aren't very culinary.
There's always an exception.
Remember,
that's why there's an exception.
Yeah, correlation does not equal causation. We know
that. But there's all this to say that based on Stephen's story, one of the things that is observed, can't really get data points on it. I suppose there's a way that you could, but the first metric is racism. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that anybody who's religious is racist. One could say that we're all a little bit racist by our predisposition.
That out,
you know,
put that on.
What a bold
you know.
But all that aside, there is.
He does not speak for the greater lot of us.
Put the little asterisks there. You know,
we're all a little gay. But you know,
that I guess.
I can only get by with so much here. No, but I think there's more observed racism from religious generally, and I think that that tribalistic nature of religion has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Oh, you can keep talking if you want.
All right. Well, I was gonna. Well, one thing I was gonna say is, it seems to me like what we're talking about now is tribalism. Tribalism, people connecting towards these things. But here's the issue. Here's the issue. Absolutely. Here's the issue, though. Tribalistic people tend to be the type of people that sort of amalgamate into those sorts of religions, and they're the exact same types of people that also do what you would do racism and that sort of thing. We're just talking about a particular subset of people that gravitate towards these things. You know, it seems to me that people that walk towards this are also the type of people that will walk towards that.
But
Please.
Racism is not an inherently mimetic idea. In other words, if you teach people to be racist just cause, I mean, like literally, like that's we're literally just trying to be racist, no reason. That's just what we're doing. People would grow out of that in a generation. I mean, like that's ridiculous.
Right. We know
Religion is
that.
pervasive,
Well,
pernicious.
I don't.
I mean,
Yeah.
it spreads itself.
I'm afraid I gotta disagree with that last point there, and not that I want to, but one thing to talk about this, like racism will go away in an instant because it serves no utility. Here's what's really difficult. It can, in particular instances, as messed up as that sounds, we really need to go down all the way down this very vicious rabbit hole because it's really important to go down it. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about religions in this way, and or not religions, sorry, but racism in this way, is let's talk about Easter Island. Let's use this as an example. So in Easter Island, you have a subset of people that exist in this one place, and then you have groups of people come in to like visit, colonialists, that sort of thing, and they come inside and introduce like a new way of thinking and all that. And they also introduce like horrible diseases and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I've just given you a very good example of why racism, as weird as that sounds, can serve, in fact, a form of utility within a given system at a given time.
Of course. I mean, in other words, like any person who would suggest that like people are racist just because of culture, that's ridiculous. In other words, like we have deep programming that tells us, okay, you're like me, so you're trustworthy, and so on.
Right.
Here's the thing. What did you just say, Trevor? That religion might be on the scale of racism. In other words, it can't do any better than racism. Like that's what I'm talking about.
It's a simple. You're right. You are correct. You are correct.
Well, I mean, we know that religion has been used to justify racism in the United States, and we know that when colonialism was at its peak, that people were going into these countries and essentially giving the existing religions the boot and telling them that these are your new gods now. And that's unfortunately how a lot of cultures have been lost. And we're thankful that we, in more recent times have been able to preserve different parts of, yeah, what's up?
I was going to say, that kind of reminds me, there's this island outside of India where that's just not visited at all, and if you try to go there, they'll immediately kill you. Like it's a tribal island.
Then that one Christian guy went there and they killed him immediately.
And all of a sudden, I've given you a great case example of when racism serves a utility. Like it's
and on the other side of the coin.
They still exist. Like they haven't gone.
Goodness.
I don't know what their gods are, but they're still there.
But listen to this, and this is why I think it's important that we keep that idea of reason versus its opponent, which I haven't said yet, but I'm going to say it. I think it's fear. And I think that fear plays hand in hand with conservatism and religiosity, at least for the Judeo-Christian tradition. I can't speak on Eastern religions. I don't know that they all necessarily have a hell.
A couple of steps further. It's a naturally divisive thing in the form we've inherited in. Ever since the birth of the cosmic duality idea with, I think, at oldest, that concept is Zoroastrian. I mean, ever since that specific time, it has been a specifically divisive thing. It is an us and it is a them. It is a good, it is a bad. You are here, you are good. They are not here, they are bad. They are them, you are us.
And anyone who knows anything knows that Judaism and Christianity, has some original ideas, but a lot of it is just simply borrowed from.
That's absolutely right.
From others,
from the Moloch and the Baal.
Yeah, I mean, any person who tries to claim that any one of the monotheisms is
take even Noah's
completely divine and original work out of the hands of the deity, don't know what they're talking about. And they've been seriously misinformed. That's all.
Yeah, take for instance the flood story in the Bible. It is orders of magnitude more ancient than its appearance in that work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I want to talk about just now is I still think that there is something mimetic about secular humanism that's also mimetic about religion. I do think that
I
they're
hope
still
secular
similar in that
humanism
way.
is mimetic.
Mm-hmm.
It is,
I
and
sure
I'm
do.
not.
Well, I think probably our strongest meme we pass down is "Do not harm your fellow man for no reason."
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Like quite
I think
literally.
we've all been told about the golden rule
Yes,
once in our
that's
lives.
Well,
the
here's.
meme. That is the
Mhm.
strongest meme.
But do we find it ourselves, or is it delivered to us? That's another really important
I
thing.
think what Stephen said earlier is important in that aspect, in that even if everything died off and somehow human beings continued on, that would be discovered again because, like I try to maintain at every discussion of ethics, there is an innate understanding that you want to preserve your life.
Mhm.
You care about your own well-being, and the golden rule is literally just is literally that, is saying if you care about your own well-being, then know that other people are caring about their own
Yeah,
well-being.
what do the
Therefore,
libertarians call it? The social contract or
the
the
Yeah,
non-aggression pact?
yeah.
yeah,
Magna Carta.
um,
What was it?
Well,
yeah.
but
I have seen the Magna Carta.
no, dude, no. I'm in no shape for this. Look, people will hear innate, Brayden. People will hear you talk about how we have an innate understanding, and you know some part of people, clever persons, individuals listening to this podcast will call bullshit. I mean, you hear the same argument from Christians. Um, I heard it over and over and over again, probably out of the Baptist theology and so on. Probably has its roots there anyway. That Jesus presents himself in everyone's life at some point, and they
Oh,
have the option to accept him or not, unless you're predestination Christian, in which case you think that
Ah,
they
a
don't have a
Calvinist, yeah.
choice, and
or
blah
yeah,
blah blah blah
the
blah.
presupposition.
Yeah, but my point is that
Some
we
of
need.
you are going to hell.
Well, yeah, really. But so my point is that clever persons hearing this, clever Christians hearing this and saying, "Oh, well, they have the same ideas just from a different angle." No, we don't.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
Not even fundamentally. No.
the innate understanding between people, it has got to be genetically predisposed. In other words, you have to use that word carefully. There's nothing in genetics that is like just certain, okay? Except like, when you get down to the chemical level. What we're talking about is how you can be predisposed to be left-handed, or whatever. Um, we have a genetic predisposition to be an aggregate social species. We are apes. And as apes, we have to have a social framework. End of statement. And that that innate understanding comes from that part of us, that ape chimp part of us. All right, and that's the good part, by the way. Anyone who's like, I heard it the other day. You think our ancestors, you think that my grandfathers were fish. That's not how that works. It's just simply not how that works.
Maybe your grandparents were fish, but
Yeah, really.
yeah.
But you get my point, people. It's just like I keep saying. It's time we grow up. It's time we really start to smell the roses. I mean, around us.
And so let me guide us along here, away
Yeah,
from the
Data.
racism and onto
I'm hungry.
more issues.
Clip that.
Perhaps you'll be sated here, but the last note on that, which is going to apply to several of these ahead, up and coming, is that to talking about innate capacities or the potential thereof. As human beings, we have the innate capacity for fear, essential part of our biology. And we also have the capacity, some would say exclusively, for reason. That is what makes us human.
It's some part of consciousness, perhaps.
Right. That's what I mean to say. And I think these two are what divide a uniquely religious person from a uniquely secular humanist person, and that's the angle I'm taking because I think that's
Yeah.
what's most
Which
applicable in this situation.
begs the question, the other animals on this planet who have higher order reasoning, I wonder what gods they have.
Yeah,
What
and
I
this
wonder.
isn't to
I wonder
say
if God is a totally unique human invention. Like
right.
would aliens have a monotheistic God?
Well,
That's
if we ever meet them,
I
perhaps we'll have to change our we'll have to ask.
I had a really strange experience recently. I wanted to share with y'all. This seems like a good point to
Sure,
bring it
yeah,
up. So I was must have been on a run. That's how I remember this.
Yeah.
I go on a run in the
on
mornings.
ayahuasca.
Yes, not this time, but like
Not this
maybe next time. Maybe next time. But this time I was on a run up early in the morning, going through the like North Berkeley Pills area and going around there. Very pretty up there. And I was thinking to myself, just randomly, just random thoughts. And at some point, it crossed my mind, like it crossed my mind to think, well, what exactly is God according to that abstraction? What is it? How does one characterize God? I remember this because at the time, I know like Tanner like had sent me like an AI generated image, just looked up God. They're just like an old man, and that was just it, like an old like looked like a philosopher with a big beard. And I saw that, and I thought to myself, well, what would be the actual accurate way of depicting what that is? Like I was thinking that to myself, and I literally just, and this has never happened to me before. I I literally just started like cathartic crying immediately. It was a really weird experience. I tried to interact at that moment, try to create like an actual accurate abstraction of what I think that actually would have been uh, correct as describing. Like if the generated model generated something correctly to show me, to behold what my idea of what God was at that moment. And I was literally, it was this cathartic thing where I could barely, I almost had to sit down. It was a very strange experience for me. Now, that's not to say that I'm telling you right now that I'm now like a Christian or I'm a theist or anything of that matter, but it was a really strange experience to me. And suddenly, a lot of the theistic perspectives made a lot more sense to me. Not to say that I believed them, but I understand the perspective so much more. And I realized that for most of my life, I just didn't have those things brought to the table, those instruments, those ways of living through life through this faith concept. Because I don't like faith. I don't rely on faith for anything. I don't think anything should be contingent upon faith. But nevertheless, suddenly those ways of interacting with reality suddenly had a hue and color that made a lot more sense. And the game of life that's being played out suddenly made a lot more sense at that moment for others. I was able to ascribe and relate to them so much more than I ever have up to that point in my life.
For sure, Trevor. I mean, so you had a powerful moment.
Mm.
Absolutely. So like, I do not hate religious people. I don't even necessarily hate like big time televangelists. Don't get me wrong. If I knew them on a personal level, I'm certain I would. You know, um, it really goes back way far for me. It's like, well, Chris, it sounds like you hate God. No, that would be absurd. What I'm trying to say is that you had yourself a powerful moment, and just relating this back to my personal story, I truly had that way of thinking for like here and there. It would be unreasonable to say that the entire time I had faith. That's not entirely true. Even hardcore Christians will tell you that everyone goes through trials of faith and so on. But what I'm trying to say is that for those of us listening, Trevor's powerful moment can be your whole life. Your whole life can be one powerful moment after the other. When you finally join the cause, like I'm not joking, for so long I had this idea that God was really running this place, and that He deeply cared about me. and because that's the myth, that's the mythos, that you have a personal attachment to God, and that solipsism is completely unwarranted. That big-headedness is completely unwarranted. Whenever you realize that those wonderful, powerful moments exclusively come from the humanist ideas in religion, like I say, your life can be that one moment after the other. And I've heard you talk like this, Trevor. I know that you know what I'm talking about. How it's like, you can seriously force yourself to stop, look around, and appreciate the, like, I mean, just stunning beauty of whatever situation you're in. There's life. There's life in my room right now. I have a cat. And it's staggering. It's staggering that he and I are even here, and by no conscious movement of the universe did we get here. And we've got to take care of each other, like, not me and my cat, but as us as humans, right? When you finally realize that, like, infinite beauty of we have got to seriously take care of each other, it can be that one moment after the other. You don't have to rely on God to get that.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Mhm.
really well said, I think. Yeah. I think there's something to be said about that too, in the sense of, we know the sky to be blue, but if you live your entire life looking through rose-tinted glasses, you will always come to conclusions through that sort of filter. But all this to say that I think that reason will lead people to a conclusion that it doesn't matter the color of your skin or that you look different from me. You are worthy of the same respect and human decency as anyone else, myself included, but vice versa. Whereas sort of these fear-based propositions and these very tribalistic natured things, despite the fact that anything can, so to speak, be tribalistic, you cannot be tribalistic and employ reason to be racist.
Yeah.
Reason
It's
is
bad
a way by
science.
which we keep ourselves from doing such, and that is why I would move us on to something else, which I think could be a quick topic because it essentially fits inside the same framework, and that is ideas on sex, not the physical act. I mean the distinction between biologically male and females with respect to religion.
Okay.
This is
So
again
like,
something that
are we talking? So just before we go into this, let me ask a few quick questions for
yeah.
I'm certain, like, a lot of people would have these questions. Are we talking about the like definition of sex? Or are we talking about the gender roles, like gender norms and so on?
As they would be considered gender roles. I refrain from the word gender because it has another use by
Right.
which we would describe more associated with LGBTQ issues.
Hmm.
And I use sex because of the literal delineation between a male and
Hmm.
female. However, we would say the gender roles in that scenario
Sure.
when also talking about those.
Well,
So I suppose that doesn't really matter in this instance.
well, I mean, speaking on it very briefly, just to start, anything that would tell you that you should feel a completely different way about how you're experiencing your reality than you are experiencing it right now might not be the best thing for you cognitively. It might not be giving you the best outlook on yourself and your self-image and how you should interpret the world.
Well, sometimes I think it's important to have an afflicted and changed self-image. I think that's important sometimes. Now we're going back to the keeping things the sameness of conservatism versus liberalism, just like on a very individual basis. I think sometimes somebody needs to go up to you and tell you that you did a wrong thing, and you should feel
Sure.
bad about that.
True.
I think those
True.
things happen, and I think that it is true that sometimes some cognitive
Yeah, I mean,
alteration is in order.
yeah, but I'm speaking purely in the sense of how you see your self-image, purely in
Mm,
how you see your manifestation is, I guess, a word for it
Your
in this.
thoughts about yourself, the character that you
Yes.
believe you have, and so on. But
Well, I
Brayton,
think.
how are we tying this in?
Uh,
Mhm.
Sure. And just as a reminder for those listening and just us again, we talk about all of these different topics because we're trying to talk about or we're trying to get to some distinction between religious people and non-religious people. Can religious people be good people? Of course they can.
Yeah,
But
100%.
what does the data show? What is the delineation between those who guide their lives by reason and those who guide their lives by religious guidelines and propositions?
Well, we should use their own word. That they self-describe themselves as being led by faith. In other words,
Sure.
what separates those who say they are led by faith and those who say they are not?
Right. And just like I had ended us with the last topic on racism, which seems like a no-brainer for many people. For others, perhaps not. But as I said, you cannot be a reasonable person and be racist.
No
Stephen,
excuses.
you've said it before. And so this is why I bring us to sexism and the idea that there are gender roles that need to be adhered to, like Trevor is speaking on, this sort of conservative idea that there is a tradition that needs to be upheld. Here I have, results from what is this? A Gaunt study, 2012, maybe, suggests that religiosity can be linked to an endorsement of benevolent sexism. I'm interested in how those words go together.
Well,
Maybe
in
means
other
that
words,
not necessarily.
perceived
Sure.
benevolence in rigid roles.
Right, like in the nuclear family, like the wife's gonna stay home and do all the cooking and the cleaning and the whatever because it's the man's job to go out and make the money or whatever. Something that isn't necessarily bad. However, it's that sort of environment that I think stews and creates a sort of unnecessary distinction between male and female. And then just as a last bit there, to actually give an example, it is not difficult to go to these holy texts, as they are, and find very
There's
blatant
specific prohibitions against what you're talking about.
Oh yes, look no further than the Middle East and the required garments of women there, or look no further than I do not permit a woman to teach.
That's another social media quote right there. I got it. Saved right there.
Or I'll give you another one. I'll give you another one. I wake up every day and thank God I wasn't born a woman. I mean,
right.
The really fundamentalist Judaic sects, believe that. They've been ordered
Trevor?
by God to do so.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm really concerned about when it comes to this is we're talking about good and bad a lot here, and to me, like, being good or bad is contingent upon some sort of like prior assertion made at this moment by Brayton in this instance,
An
or
agreed upon
anyone
framework.
else. And we haven't begun to agree upon anything just yet. It seems to me that we sort of intuit something, we sort of get at it, us, and we can call that agreeing upon something. But nevertheless, all over here. Nevertheless, it seems to me that it really is just based upon these prior assertions to lead up to this article of discussing this, like Brayton speaking of like the nuclear family being good in this way or bad in that way. Well, it is good and it is bad, and the same thing is true with secular humanism. It is good and it is bad, and the same thing can be said for Islam. It is good and it is bad. And you have to ask yourself, well, what does he mean by that? What I mean is, it's based upon what questions you're asking when you reach the table and you begin asking questions. Does it bring people together? It's good at doing that. There you are. And just like that, you have it's good.
Yeah, is
now,
secular humanism good at mobilizing, lots and lots of by force things? No, no, it's not.
Right. I don't. Yeah, and just to make the case clear here for everyone, what I'm talking about is what is good for human beings, because I don't think that we're ever going to get any better at nailing down some sort of universal morality amongst human beings, because it's not like, cats and dogs are going to come to the table and say, well, hey, I got something to say. They will never do that. It is only us who possess the ability to use language to communicate in
as
a complex form.
sophisticatedly as we do,
Right.
because
And
some of the
so,
higher order primates can, communicate.
right. But I wonder if they're sitting down talking about, John Stuart Mill's on liberty.
Right.
But
Right.
That being said, I am talking about what is good for human beings. Secular humanism is probably the worst thing for what God wants, almost definitively. But I don't even think that that's what some religious people are talking about when they talk about what is good. Maybe sometimes they mean what's in God's best interest, but other times they probably mean what's good for human well-being. So of course I have to pin this to something, otherwise this is all just floating out there in Ethereum and whatever.
That's really what I mean by agreed upon. Pinning it to something.
Right.
To placate those who, who have trouble with that idea. In other words.
Mm-hmm. And further cement that, our government is not built upon a desire to feed a particular God's interest. Our government, at least the way I think it should be, and the way I think it is partly set up, is to ensure the interests of the American people, which part of that, I believe, is ensuring the well-being of the American people. And we are all human beings, therefore our government exists to ensure our well-being, and so our laws reflect that which would be good for us. Our laws are not everybody's got to go to church and pray every Sunday, because that's not what we are after, so to speak.
That is to say that everything.
Yeah.
Well, that is to say everything is contingent upon this prior assertion that you make. It's a good assertion. Don't get me wrong. It's a good assertion. That is to say that everything comes right back down to human well-being. Let's do this in terms of human well-being. You've set out this chess game before us, and let's play this game. You set out that, and then everything else follows. It's really useful.
Technically, Trevor, I think the genome started this chess game of human well-being. You know what I mean? In other words, we carry the genome forward. In other words, we don't have to necessarily bolt everything to our survival, but that's a good place to bolt something down. I mean, in other words, is religion good for the survival of the species? No. Is secular humanism good for the survival of the species? Probably.
Well, here's another thing about that. When we talk about is this good for the species? Well, it's not just in a blank room. It's not in a vacuum. It's is this good? Is this good? And this is really important to explore. Is this good compared to this? And then something you can pick one. You can make that decision. I think right now we are at this moment. You and I, all four of us, everyone listening, we're at this moment where we are comparing the sort of Christendom or Islam or any of these things compared to what we're currently to what we are currently creating. And at the exact same time, that's not all that we're doing. We're also comparing what we currently have right now in our current society against Soviet communism, for example. Or we're doing this on many different levels in many different ways, and we're making these decisions to say that this is the better choice between these two things. You make these sorts of decisions with this list. So when I say this, I mean to say that if you exist in a reality where you fundamentally don't visualize things in terms of this concept of secular humanism that the four of us currently are speaking of, if this is instead something more like the fourth, let's say this is the first century, and this is when the third century would be a better point, when barbarians are flooding through Rome, and there's Christianity is sweeping through, more or less creating what you and I would consider the memification or the memified growth of this idea that brings everything together and sort of creates this new form of Christianity that sweeps through the Ostrogoths and that sort of thing, creating what you and I would consider to be a more humane society for that time. You would, of course, say that Christianity is, according to those means, good. But, however, at the same time, it's bad according to other means, because you're not at the same time also evaluating it in terms of like the loss of like philosophy and that sort of thing. It's really complicated. And it is in fact good, based upon some assertions that you're presently making, who you are, where you presently are at this moment. You can't even when you make this assertion of for good human well-being. Well, there are many things that are good for human well-being, and some things that are kind of often over to the side to these things. It's good for philosophy, or it's bad for philosophy, Christianity at this time, but it's also good for the stopping of barbarian hordes sweeping through, and Attila the Hun and that sort of thing. It's really complicated, and so is all of these religions in this way.
Sure.
True.
And that's what I want to get down to, is that, you know, I don't care what time period it is. If you held a sword up to someone's throat at any time, they will beg you for their life because they care about their own well-being, unless for some reason they don't. A primary example, someone may be willing to die and not beg for their life because they are convinced that they will go somewhere afterwards. Which is a great antithetical example to
Those-
the entire.
Those who are misinformed.
Those who are misinformed have been led astray.
Misinformed compared to what we currently have available right now. The four of us are currently speaking of. Compared to that, yes, but in a
compared
vacuum,
to the lack
Yes.
of evidence for anything beyond
I was
anything
about to say,
consciously beyond.
that doesn't really jive well there. I mean, it is an unfalsifiable claim to suggest that we go somewhere after death. There's no difference in treating it like it exists or doesn't exist. You know,
Right.
in other words, it's like we have no choice. If you actually really examine it, we have no choice but to not believe, or as it was said, I am so made I cannot believe.
Mm-hmm. You had said something about, you know, we compare all these different things, like these different religions and these things that we're making up, or these ideals that we want to aspire to versus what we actually exist in now, and all talking about well-being. And I think that's the entire point of what we do, is to figure out through time what is the best moral system. And sure, back in whatever time period, someone might have said that Christianity was the best thing because they didn't have secular humanism. They didn't have something that was looking out for what I believe to be the actual interest of everyone.
By the way, there might be another mode of thinking that is better on down the road. I'm certain Bray could agree with that. If another modality of thought came around, I mean, who are we to say that? Who are we to disagree with the data if it showed? You know,
right? And we've talked before on the podcast about extending this humanistic aspect beyond just humanity, and sort of more particularly the rabbit hole you can go down. I know Trevor's brought up the Jane example a couple of times about that. Maybe that is the ideal, but we will wait until we have the data or the examples. I think we just lost Tanner.
Yes, we did. He vanished without a trace. Maybe his phone died? We shall discover later.
I hope not.
I also hope not. I'll send him a message.
I actually have a challenge question for you, Bray, later.
Yeah.
We'll come back.
Yeah, I mean, I'll move on because we can hit this next one pretty quick, and then the following few are a little bit different.
Thank you for sending him a message, Trevor.
Important. But
do you want me to just continue, or what do we?
Yeah, let's just keep going. When he rejoins, he'll say something funny. Well, I'm sure.
We've talked about sexism and racism, and again, I use these sort of points that I have because these are pivotal moments in our current society, sort of hallmarks of ways that people can go, or ways to. Well, racism and sexism are particularly ways not to be good, but it's the line that we are drawing to kind of put people in a camp, so to speak. or what they are more likely to be based on the data here. My next one is on, what is this? LGBTQ issues. This one is as clear as white is on black. Unless you're like Unitarian or something, or you live in a huge city where they can't afford to not be.
Yeah, there are large swaths of misinformed Christians who are just, they're even down here in the Bible Belt, come one and all, like if you're homosexual, we still accept you. It's like, no, you
Right.
don't. You have not read your book, correct? You
No,
have not read your
yes.
book, right? I mean, I have, and it's in there.
And that's it's why I hate to say it. I really do hate to say it, but when I hear these people talk, and I have family members who are these people, because there are LGBTQ people in my family who have already had this struggle many years ago, and everybody's come to terms, blah 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 blah. But I've heard it a million times. Well, exactly as you said, come one, come all, we accept you for who you are, etc. And I'm like, oh no. I hate to tell you, but those people waving the signs around that say, God hates expletives, and those people who,
Insert expletive
XYZ,
here,
right? They're right.
They're
These
right.
super fundamental people, the people who open the book, read it, and take very little extra seasoning on top of their Bible verses, are the most correct as I see it.
I'm afraid I got to disagree for this reason. Those books are full of contradictions. They are right, but so are the people that say, come on in. They're both completely right, because there are things that are both espoused within that book all at the same time. There are sections of Leviticus that lead to the Westboro Baptist Church. That's absolutely valid. But there are also the parts that talk about how it's all just here and now, and we just need to love one another. We've talked about this before. Like, all of those things are in there. It seems
demonstrating
yes,
something very valuable.
That it's
something
very human.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yes.
In
other words,
the
every
yes
axiom in any one of the monotheisms that is good is hijacked from that innate humanism that we cherish. End of statement. I do not have time to argue that point. Every perceivable good thing that comes out of religion is hijacked from from this innate idea.
Right. But another really difficult thing about this is it seems to me that all of the tribalism that you find in religion is itself also hijacked from human behavior. All of it is, both the good and the bad. It's all just a reverberation. It's just a distinction that we make in the dirt of like, this is religion and this isn't. And it seems to me that it's all following itself. It's all very collinear with just all of human behavior.
Well, consider
we're
this.
talking about, please, yeah.
If we describe tribalism as simply the ability for a bunch of people to group up and share ideals, that is not inherently a bad thing. No. It is when those ideals that are shared within this tribalistic nature are demonstrably bad for
human
often
well-being,
other
whatever.
people than those within the tribe, because it's often inflicted on others outside. But had it been on the opposite end of the spectrum, those being inflicted upon people within the tribe, it would be bad for them as well. Vis-a-vis racism, sexism, LGBTQ discrimination, it's just often that, if it's being inflicted to people outside, is because they do not share those views. If you have a group of white evangelicals that are all straight, their prejudice is likely aimed at people who are non-white, non-evangelical, and non-straight. However, if it had been the opposite token, and there was a tribe of people that were, all of some sort of Asian descent, and they were all, are women, and they were all lesbians, they could be considered
a colony
of
lesbians, Aubrey.
The gay Asian
God.
women wave is
What
coming.
the
Look,
fuck
look.
did I come back in on?
Look, Tanner, look. I'm gonna say this in the most friendly version I can, okay? So like I really get where Trevor's coming from. Like it is all very politically expedient for us to hypothetically make an island full of uh, whatever. Like you literally climb the totem pole of intersectionality. It's so politically expedient to be like we are superior because we believe this. We're superior because we believe that. It's very easy to fall into that. What we have to realize is that the the humans that made God, not the other way around, the humans that made God, uh, uh, were products of their own time. I mean, what they accomplished isn't necessarily excusable in the way of like oh well all this happened so all these good things and all these bad things happened so maybe they cancel out whatever. All right, the point is that I'm really trying to make. Uh, the best parts of religion come from the most human parts, and I don't think anyone can quite argue that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, this this might be around the place to cut the episode. We've hit about an hour and a half.
And
I want
Tanner's
Tanner to
dropped out.
sleep.
Every
You dropped out? Yeah, I think he's back. Tanner, are you back?
Can
Say
you
some
guys
words.
see me?
No,
See
dude.
you
No.
but you
He-
are
he
heard.
went from this to
we
not
can't hear
there.
you to this.
Yeah.
Hang on, wait.
He's gonna disappear again, isn't he?
How am I not joined to this, huh?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. In post, you look just fine.
Not to worry.
Well, taking this, wrapping this up, I suppose, because I have some more points, but they all do really fall under the same
Right.
sort of method of evaluation, and that is that one side, I hate to say side, but it's really what we're faced with. The non-religious, quite literally the non-religious are utilizing reason as a way to navigate the world. And that is why they end up on the side of the issues that they do. Whereas I believe that if you are religious and you claim that you are navigating the world through reason, I think you are misinformed or you are deluding yourself. And so my other 3 points here, following up racism, sexism, and sort of the gender and sexual orientation discussion, is climate, bodily autonomy, and guns. And it doesn't take much to see that if you use reason and look at the data, the overwhelming amount of scientific data, we understand that climate change is a real issue and that human activity has a very big part in that. And according to this, from the sociology professor guy, like this poll shows that the religiously unaffiliated are tied with Hispanic Catholics for the most aware that climate change is caused mostly by human activities such as burning fossil fuels, and the least convinced, so to speak, categories are white evangelical Protestants, Latter-day Saints, and white mainline non-evangelical Protestants make up the
which by the way does necessitate to ask the questions like how educated are these people and so on. There are too many variables to account for, in other words.
And there's another conversation out there to be had about the intertwined or the entanglement between this religiosity and the political ideology. I mean, most white evangelical Protestants are conservative. Those sort of inform each other, although I lean towards religion informing your politics. At least they correlate. But again, the same thing with bodily autonomy. That one may be a little bit different. But guns, same thing. Same sort of it's the idea of fear versus reason for me at the core of it.
So if we're closing here, I would say as my closer, it seems to me as we've explored this conversation now for the last hour and a half, I've become more and more convinced that what religion is, the way to characterize it, is so variable and just so multivariate in what it's capable of, whether it be in denial of this or serving this purpose or doing this or doing that or all these sorts of things. It does so many things, like the overarching category. Uh, it's really difficult to have an insightful, useful conversation about this topic. That being, does religion correlate with good behavior? It's just so much fuzz. Like if anyone knows, if you do like a basic linear regression, like x against y, and you like draw like a line and like you put a bunch of points and you want to see if something is statistically significant, we have one thing you would call the R squared. The R squared is how disparate are all these points away from the center line? How precise is this correlation? Because something could be highly significant between like x and y, like 0.001. But then you go look at the results, and the R squared is wild, which means that it's just a scatter plot of data. It's not precise at all. And to me, it's so unprecise. The R squared is so low on this particular way of visualizing reality that it's really difficult to have really insightful, useful conversations about this, because it really is variable. It comes right back down to that thing we brought up earlier about how there were these Christians that go around espousing the Leviticus sections of their books, being completely right, and also the sections of Christians that talk about like sections of the New Testament about forgiving one's neighbor, and that story of Jesus forgiving that prostitute with thou cast the first stone, that sort of thing. Like there are huge contradictions here, and I think in those contradictions you see reverberations of what it means just to be a human being, and just like that you see and you suddenly realize that all of it is just a bunch of human beings doing things. And then all of a sudden religion
Yes.
doesn't the distinction of religion between what makes somebody a human, a religious human or a non-religious human, isn't really of very much value. Because I could think of many secular humanists that have very wacky beliefs that I disagree with, that I would consider net negatives compared to other possibilities. I do think so.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, I could also find religious people. And it's not even, I can't even intuit what it leads to. I can't even do that sort of intuition thing, because we could talk about like, well, there's a lot of X, but it's mostly going to be Y. We could talk about that. Like there's a lot of people that do good for religion, but it's mostly this. But for me, it's like I can't do that with either secular humanists or this thing. It's so fuzzy. It's so difficult to be able to visualize according to these means. And just like that, it's you kind of come to the realization that the topic itself is it's just not a great question in that way.
Well, first I'd like to ask our host something. You ready, Bray?
Oh, I'm ready.
So, if you did the research, let's say that we lived in just a different, world, so to speak, just a make-believe hypothetical situation here. Let's say that you looked into the data and you found that religion actually encourages good behavior. Would you be okay with it? It's a really hard question for me to answer.
Would I be okay with it if the data showed that being religious made you a better person?
In other words, would you encourage people to be religious if the data show clearly that being religious makes you a better person? Like conclusively.
Mm-hmm. This is the Ivan Karamazov problem. If anyone's
Right.
familiar with the brothers Karamazov, he's the second oldest brother, and he's the atheist. He's an atheist, but he's a very serious fundamentalist, orthodox Christian in a couple ways, and that he believes that people need to have that. Otherwise, they'll go around in complete anarchy and raping across the
Right.
streets. They believe that, or he believes that. He's a hardcore atheist, and yet he has that belief to be true.
This is, surprisingly enough, a very central discussion of existentialism.
True.
and
True.
Trevor, you know this because we were both in the same class. But just like what you said with the Brothers Karamazov, is the same with another text that I believe we read in that class, the San Manuel Bueno Martyr.
I
about
love
the,
that book. I love that
so
short
good.
story. I
The
cried
guy
so
who's
hard.
he's an atheist, but he pretends to be this. I think he's a priest.
Yes.
For this town because they couldn't survive without him.
Yes, they could.
Well, there.
You gotta read the short story. You gotta
Yeah.
read that story. Steven,
But
you would
Send
love
it
that
to me.
story.
And Tanner's piping in with the Bridge of San Luis Rey as well, or Louis Ray. I'm trying to pronounce that properly.
Either
but
way. Back to the question though, if the data show conclusively.
If the data shows it conclusively, then yes, I would have to agree with the data. I would be interested to know by what means that it makes people a better person.
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying in this hypothetical question, like it's conclusive that it makes people better,
Mhm.
and it's causative why people are better. You know what I mean?
I think so. In the same breath, I can imagine a religion where it is full of completely false claims. There's this supernatural being that created
Sure.
the universe and sent his himself in a form of his son down to do
blah,
all
blah,
these
blah.
miracles, but everything he did was to the benefit of humanity. There was no, at any point, it was what Christianity should have been, so to speak. Coming down and saying, don't own each other, don't own each other as property, don't kill each other, do everything to the best.
In other words, if some entity gave us a completely humanitarian decalogue,
Right?
you know what I mean? But
Then I
completely
would
false
say
claims about the supernatural. See,
I would be in the same position as San Manuel Bueno, and I would be going, I don't believe a lick of this, but the story is good. So if people are going to go out and convince themselves that this actually happened and is true, if people are going to go out and read a Spider-Man comic and actually believe it happened, if people are going to go out and read Lord of the Rings and believe that it actually happened, but that makes them a better person, who am I to get caught up in? I mean,
see, look, let me take
there's-
this opportunity. Let me take this opportunity to invite once again what I keep saying. We are constantly in the humanities and philosophy expected to talk as though some very serious fundamental parts of the universe haven't been discovered. Like, it's like scientifically all these fields are stuck like 200 and 300 years ago. Okay? So here's the thing. I really, really disagree with, in other words, if religion encouraged and caused people to be better, but it was a false claim about the supernatural as it is,
right.
it that means, to me, that we have to inform ourselves of what's going on. The universe, our dear listener, is set up in such a way that it cannot have a creator. That there's nothing to suggest any such thing. Anyone who claims that they 100% know there is no God is lying to you. Anyone who claims for 100% they know that there is a God is also lying to you. A healthy atheism is good, is my point. The universe does not work in such a way that it has a creator. Let me reiterate that. So that's why I would disagree. That level of solipsism does something to somebody. It unhinges them.
And I don't mean to say that my hang up is that I recognize the good. I empathize with the struggle of the characters in the works of which
in these
Trevor and I are familiar.
Yeah.
I empathize heavily with them.
But you
However,
have to, because it's a human struggle.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And it's why I do. But like you said, and I've said it before, I think that the truth is more important.
The truth is more important every time. for me.
Mm-hmm.
But so look, let me close off with a few things here, and these will be my last words. I know I always apologize for talking so much, but I do mean it. I told you people in this episode, I was groomed to be the demagogue that Hitchens talks about. Whenever he's like, it's the demagogue in me. I got to be on this podium and I got to have a stage and everything, So it's something that I've turned into a good thing. You know what I mean? I'm a teacher. I'm a good orator, and so on. But so, our dear listener, both of us still listening, and Tanner's probably still listening. But anyway, most, if not all, of your comforts in life, including things like the electricity and things that powers your home and the food that you eat and so on, came out of the brainchilds of atheists, or at least stylistically flavored deists of their day. I think it is not a very far leap to suggest that deists of their day would be atheists today, knowing all that we know. But anyway, the point stands. Most of what you care about came from the brainchild of an atheist. And those same people could not possibly run for office in this country. There's
Right.
no possible way an atheist with an atheist secular human platform wins a public office in this country. There's no way. Representatives, I'm certain there are atheist representatives. Senators, maybe not. I have no idea. I'd have to look it up. President, you can count it right out. There's no possible way today, right now, that the best, most creative, most solution-oriented minds out there have no chance of being your leader, and we as a society fail to cherish those who have come, including people like Einstein. I mean, anyone who tells you that Einstein believed in a personal God is lying to you. And it's used all the time that people like Newton and Einstein were Christians. No, they weren't, and who cares? Nobody. Anyway, here I have written down, use Trevor's difference argument against him, and I plan to. All right? So here's the thing. Let's just pretend for a moment like we agree that being religious is not causative to being a bad person. I think it is. But let's just pretend like we agree that it's not. Well, according to trustworthy metrics, that argument of differences has to apply in your mind about religious and not religious. That's all I have to say about that. But like I say, that this isn't just a final word. I'm just trying to wrap it up. And that is the question. Is secular humanism causative to making good people? Probably. Maybe not, but probably. Is religion causative of making bad people? Yes. I don't have to excuse that claim very much. Does that level of the universe owes me this deep connection of the universe is here to serve me? That is causative to making bad people, and I could not budge on that if I tried.
Tanner, do you have any closing remarks? It's him just scuttling across his floor.
Picking up fallen nickels.
Religion removes rationality from thought.
Yes.
I very strongly believe, and that makes you a worse member of any rational secular
of our ape
nation.
race.
Look at the United States' founding as the first secular republic to ever exist in the history of the world.
And look at the power.
There was a reason it was referred to and is still referred to as the Great Experiment.
Yep.
Not once had it happened before, and I mean it's happened a couple of times since then. We've been an example, I know, at least for the French Republic for one thing. But
yeah, France, Germany. I mean,
but
you know.
By stripping away the innate divisiveness that comes with religion and treating all peoples and all religions as mostly equal, with great exception to a few populations that have only just relatively recently in national history been given their rights as members of this, society. We have done more in the absence of religion than we ever could have with it. I very strongly believe that. But just in my closing remarks, I mean, take yourself right now in the room that you are in. Take one step out of that to the house you're in. Perhaps you have pets or family members or people visiting or something. Their lives still go on outside of your current field of view. Take a step out from even within your house to the, neighborhood at large. Life goes on, etc., etc., etc. And take all these leaps back till you get to just the universe at large. In the complete and total absence of us and our minuscule effect on causality, everything still goes on. You don't have to believe it does.
It's going to go on without you, in fact.
Absolutely. And that's just the world in the absence of our purview of religion. Whether you choose to believe or not will not change any outcome on the trajectory of the arrow of time. It sounds bleak, but I mean, at the same time, it's frankly quite a liberating thought, I think. But that's where I'd like to leave things.
It is, Tanner, and just quick comment. You and I are literally saying the same thing, just said differently. Like actually the same thing.
Cool.
I'll close with a little bit of stuff. Can you be a secular humanist and be both a good and a bad person? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be a religious person and still be a good person or a bad person? Yes, I think so. However, when you are a secular humanist and you are being good, you're doing fantastic. When you are a secular humanist and you are being bad, it is because you have abandoned your hold of reason, or reason's hold of you, perhaps. And I think it is a similar pattern for religious people. When you are a religious person and you are doing bad things, it's because you have let reason take the back seat in your life. And when you are religious and you are doing good things, I think it is because you have allowed reason to slip in, whether willingly or unnoticed, and you are acting in those moments on humanistic ideals. So does religion correlate to good behavior? I think I want to make clear at the end that you can be religious and be a good person, because I would expect a religious person to tell me as an atheist that I can be a good person as well. And I always know that I'm going to have a good conversation with someone who's religious when they make that plain at the beginning of the conversation as well, just to put that out there. But I do want to point out that while good people, I do want to point out that while religious people can be good people, I will make sure that we get in a quote by the one and only: religion makes otherwise normal people, good people, do wicked and disgusting things.
Yes.
And that is Chris Hitchens.
He would have been really upset by you calling him Chris just then. That's a funny thing. There you go.
Christopher Hitchens.
Very good.
Chris Hitches, the old chestnut. Cool.
And I think that's where we're going to leave it. Perhaps we'll have some more to say about this in the future, but thanks for joining us. This is the latest episode of Four Mortal Coils here on Riverside. Hope this video works out. We'll see you guys in the next one.